Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Friday, June 28th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Akron game in 64 days, the game against Michigan in 155 days, Big Ten Media Days in, I should have done the math before this, 26 days or so. We're counting down the days to Big Ten Media Days with the 50 for 50 series at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Tony Gerdeman writing that every day, counting down from 50 days to the start of Big Ten Media Days. And each day has all sorts of different insight and analysis in terms of individual matchups to watch this year, predictions for Ohio State, predictions for college football nationally, and much more. Tony is my guest today. We're going to be talking about four of those predictions that I thought were particularly interesting recently that I wanted to talk about. Tony, the first one, the Buckeyes will rush for 300 yards in a Big Ten game. That doesn't seem like that high a number, but when I saw it, I thought, I bet this probably has not happened nearly as often as people think.
Yeah, and it has not happened as often as it used to either. I think the last time was in 2022, and I don't believe they did it in 2021. Didn't do it last year, so they've done it once in their last 27 Big Ten games. So, Tom, I don't know where you're from, but where I'm from, that's pretty bold. That's a pretty bold prediction. But it hasn't happened, and really happening against Indiana. Does it really count? For our purposes, it does. But I think it's going to happen again this year, and not unrelatedly because of the quarterback running, the running backs running, Chip Kelly involved, an offensive line in its second year essentially together. And so I feel pretty good about this one.
Yeah, this seems like enough stuff has changed. Last year was not a good rushing attack at all for Ohio State, but all the stuff that you mentioned, offensive line should be better. Addition of the quarterback run as a consistent threat in every play, that should help. Running backs should be better than they were last year. Addition of Chip Kelly potentially makes it a little bit more of a dynamic and unpredictable running game. I mean, all of that stuff feels like it adds up to it should be a substantially improved Ohio State ground game this year. So yeah, I will co-sign this one. I think they get there, but that is, I'm sure if you went back to the 1970s and said Ohio State's going to run for 300 yards in a game against a Big Ten opponent one time in 3 seasons, people would have probably needed you to fetch their fainting couches. That was probably, without going back and looking, I'm going to guess that was probably something that happened more often than not in the 1970s. But it's a little bit of a different game now than it was back then. All right, so here's another thing that's probably a little different now than it was back then. Tony predicts a defensive player for the Buckeyes to score multiple touchdowns this season. I'm just sort of thinking back. I know Haskell Garrett had multiple touchdowns. I don't know if they were in the same season. I think Draymond Jones might have had multiple touchdowns. I'm not sure those were in the same season. Do you have to go back to... Do you have to go all the way back to Malik Hooker to have someone who did this for Ohio State, or am I forgetting someone?
No, you had to name. Draymond Jones had 2 in 2018. And so this year it's been a while, but it's not unheard of. I think the fact that it was a defensive tackle doing it in 2018 is pretty impressive. Normally you would just assume it's a couple of pick sixes, something like that. Or, 7 Banks scored once on a punt block return, and maybe go ahead and get a pick 6 later on. But I think this is the year, Tom. We're going to see a more aggressive defense. You can gamble a little bit more. You can jump some routes. I know Denzel Burke, Davison Igbenos, and Jordan Hancock are looking forward to that. Jordan Hancock wants more interceptions than he had last year. He said, talking to him after the spring game, I think he said for about 5 straight weeks, he had an interception nearly every week. And then I went back and I think it was only like 1 interception in that time frame. But he had his hands on them, and we know he had a pick 6 in there. But a guy that, all of these guys are going to be more aggressive because they have Caleb Downs behind them. And yet, don't forget about the defensive tackles, and don't forget about JT Tuimoloau scoring at defensive end. Like, there are a number of different guys that can do this. I think it's time. I kind of feel like maybe this is a secondary scoring, maybe a cornerback jumping some routes, something like that. Or maybe, Jermaine Matthews returns both of his touchdowns this year instead of just his only one like last year. I think it's going to happen. I'm not going to put a name to it, Tom. It's not that kind of bold prediction.
Yeah, this is just a prediction, not a bold prediction. It is a little bit of an outlier. It just feels like for years we have been talking about the fact that, the Ohio State defense has been pretty good, but they just haven't forced as many turnovers as you would sort of expect them to. They have never had the, crazy plus 20 turnover kind of season or whatever the statistical outlier kind of number would be there. There was something you actually asked Ryan Day about a week ago, was the level of aggression they're going to bring, because you could just stay back and trust your veteran players, or the fact that you have veteran players, the fact that you have a Caleb Downs behind you might allow you to be more aggressive. And, he didn't have a real, he didn't say, this is exactly what we're going to do this year. But, that's obviously something that, based on his answer, that they have been thinking about. And that, if they're thinking about it and they're potentially going to be more aggressive, I think that only makes it more likely you're going to see, you force some big mistakes from the opponent.
Yeah, the opportunities are going to be there, but you've just got to capitalize on them. And how many times have we seen a cornerback, the ball goes through his hands and you see the anguish on their face, or defensive tackle when the ball gets popped up and they're catching it, there's 16 guys around them to tackle him or block for him, and there's nowhere to go. But hey, 16 games, make something happen. Don't be a baby.
All right. Speaking of making things happen and not being a baby, this is one I do know the last time Ohio State accomplished it, and this is very bold. The Buckeyes will return a kickoff for a touchdown. Last time that happened in a game was Jordan Hall against Michigan in 2010. It has been a minute, and every year it feels like, well, Ohio State has such great skill talent. Of course, someone's going to bust one. They haven't even really been particularly close very often. I think, Paris Campbell had a couple where I remember him getting kind of inside the 10, maybe something like that. And they've had some. Emeka Ibuka had one or two a couple of years ago where he got across the 50. Maybe Xavier Johnson had one or two, but this is one where it feels like they haven't even really been all that close in recent years. So, all right, other than you needed to fill a spot in this prediction thing, what's the thinking here? Why is this the magic year when Ohio State is going to return a kickoff for a touchdown?
You just answered it, Tom. I needed to fill a spot. No, I will say there's a change with the special teams. You move on from Parker Fleming, the special teams coordinator. So maybe there's something there. I also think I wonder if they realized that they weren't aggressive enough last year, and that hindered the offense. As we've talked about in the past, when you have CJ Stroud, you have Justin Fields, you have Dwayne Haskins, you don't need to try to get 30 yards on the kickoff return, because there's really no difference between 75 yards and 65 yards with that kind of offense. There might be a difference this year. There was a difference last year. So do you get more aggressive and try to return some more kickoffs? I will say though, Tom, the numbers are pretty concerning in terms of they received 40 kickoffs last year. They returned only 13 of them, and not all of those are returnable. But to think like if they're only going to get returned 13 kicks this year, I'm asking you to hit on 1 of 13. That's not very easy. However, they are due, Tom. The Ohio State Buckeyes are so due. I went through. The opponent has kicked off 707 times since the last Ohio State kickoff return for a touchdown. 707.
It does sound like they're due. Ohio State has also not lost to an in-state opponent in over 100 years. Tony, the Akron Zips, are they due? Maybe. Who's to say? We will all find out together in 64 days on the answer to that. I have a feeling I know the answer on that one. One other thing that I think is working against you here, in addition to the, call a fair catch, take it to the 25 thing, if this defense is as good as it could be, you're going to have fewer kickoff opportunities. If we're talking about safeties and counting free kicks here, and you weren't clear on that, you didn't spell that out, so maybe that works for you a little bit. But I think the Jim Knowles defense may be working against you a little bit on your quest for the first kickoff return for a touchdown since 2010. Last one, 2 true freshmen will score multiple touchdowns this season. All right, Tony, it's Jeremiah Smith and who? James Peoples?
Yeah, I think that's what I have in my mind. And that seems like, boy, that's pretty simple. That's cut and dry. That's go ahead and sign me up, because that's going to happen. But the reason, Tom, this is such a fantastically bold prediction, do you know the last time you had 2 true freshmen score multiple touchdowns for the Buckeyes in a season?
Thank you for asking. I do not. I'm going to guess it was 2018. Did you get Chris Olave and someone that year?
I don't know who that someone would have been, but the answer I have is 2013 with Ezekiel Elliott and Dontre Wilson.
Wow.
Both scored 3 that year. So, and Dontre Wilson was part of the offense. Ezekiel Elliott was the guy that carried the ball in the fourth quarter to run out the clock when the game was over. So I would think they're as well equipped to do it this year as they've been at any time in the past. Depth chart will help them in this one. But I think, those are the two guys that I'm banking on doing it. And, I'd be more surprised if Mylan Graham was the second guy in there. I think we just go ahead and the free space is Jeremiah Smith, and somebody else is going to step in there and get a couple of touchdowns.
All right. Well, there are 4 predictions from Tony. Will they all come true based on history? Absolutely not. But, hey, you never know. Maybe this is the year he gets lucky. Finally, a reason to be excited for the 2024 Ohio State football season. You get to find out if Tony's right about something. That is, I personally cannot wait. It's going to be a fun season for, I guess, several other reasons as well, such as some of the biggest games in the college football calendar, all involving Ohio State, going to Oregon, going to Penn State, Michigan coming to town. There are some big ones on the schedule, and could be several big ones after that Michigan game as well. We will be there for all of them. Tony, Kevin, and I covering the team for BuckeyeHuddle.com. Got Mark covering recruiting, got our whole team of X's and O's gurus, making you a smarter football fan. We will be covering all of the stuff leading up to that. Busy time in recruiting coming up in the next few days. Some big announcements coming in terms of top Ohio State targets announcing their commitments. We'll be covering all of those for you at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We are just over 3 weeks away from the start of Big Ten Media Days. Always something we look forward to every year. A ton of great content, a ton of great stuff, opportunities to talk to people from all around the league, TV executives, officiating managers, lots of good stuff. Plus, hey, we'll get to talk to Sharon Moore and some Michigan players. We'll get to talk to Ryan Day and some Buckeyes, James Franklin and some Penn State Nittany Lions, Dan Lanning and some Oregon Ducks. The Beavers not invited this year. Washington. I mean, this is going to be a big, exciting event. Big, exciting year of college football. We will be there for all of it. We hope you can join us at BuckeyeHuddle.com for all of it as well. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.